Welcome to the Supply Chain Pioneers podcast, where we highlight industry leaders on the forefront of innovation and technology in planning, procurement, and logistics. Hosted by your supply chain pro to know, Ulf Venn.
Supply Chain Pioneers is powered by Everstream Analytics. Everstream gives you the predictive insights and analytics to make your supply chain faster, smarter, safer, and leaner. Go to everstream.ai to book your demo today. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Supply Chain Pioneers. And today I have with me Dominic Regan, who's a Senior Director for Logistics Solutions at Oracle. And with this, welcome, Dominic.
Thank you, Ulf. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come along and speak to the audience.
Thank you so much for being here. And in order to give some context and have everybody know more about you, why don't you quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Dominic Regan, as probably people can tell from my accent, I'm British, based in the UK. Within Oracle, as you say, I look after what we call our logistics applications. So that's transportation, global trade, warehouse management. Been in the industry now for quite some time. Started my career back in 1987, studied at uni, and then fell into logistics and haven't found my way out since then. So yeah, still here, still hard at work in the logistics space.
Yeah, I invited you because I know you're passionate for logistics, and that's why we want to talk to you. But before we start about your passion for logistics, let's start with how you got into logistics, because you just said after uni, you just fell into it. So tell us, how did you fall into it? But then also, was it as you expected?
Yes. Yeah. Good questions. Yeah. How did I get into logistics? Interestingly for me, I mean, my family, my uncle, my mother's brother was a farmer, and farming has never been terribly good in the UK. He got into another aspect involved in farming, which was transportation. So he had a small fleet of trucks. Used to spend all my summers down with him, sitting in there, going around various farms in Kent, picking up produce. And that then became the main part of the business. So if you like, I came into logistics very much through the practical side, and got involved and interested in, particularly in road haulage. And that's really what I spent my time at university studying. So I did a bachelor's in transportation planning and management, and then a master's in transportation as well. So if you like, I can trace it all back to a summer job working for my uncle, and say being involved in the very much the sort of physical aspects of transportation. And then when I left university, I started working for a small company that did logistics consultancy, very much around warehousing. And we then went from there into implementing warehousing solutions, which if you think back in the late 80s, they were really just starting certainly in the UK, mostly in Europe. It was American software companies that were expanding outside of the US, very often replacing manual type systems, maybe using postcards or whatever. And as they got involved in the programming of those, then the implementation, the support of them, the sales of them, and then really never looked back from that. And has it fulfilled expectations, or what have I found in logistics? After all those years working in the space, getting on for sort of 40 years now, I still find it absolutely fascinating. I think it's an area within supply chain where you can really make a difference. If you implement best practice, deploy these type of solutions, it can make you more efficient, it can reduce costs, it can improve customer service. And when you think about supply chain, what's not to like about that? And I say it just gives, I think, a great opportunity for people who work in this space, and for hopefully also for customers who use these types of solutions to gain value from them. Yeah, it's very much lived up to my expectations of a career in this space.
Yeah. But also, I gotta say, I made now maybe 40 of these podcasts, maybe even more. I should know, by the way. Anyway, that's the first time somebody said that they didn't just coincidentally somehow fell into it, but actually had a relation before starting in that space. So that's a very unique story. See, we already uncovered something.
Yeah, it is pretty unusual. Unfortunate, I sometimes get asked to go and speak to students on supply chain courses. And again, I'll often say I've ended up doing, if you like, building a career out of something I studied at university, which, tends to be pretty unusual. Maybe it's just that sort of single-minded obsession with logistics. Yeah, there's a lot to be answered for there, I think.
Yeah. But let's talk about your obsession for logistics, because as you said, you've been in this WMS, TMS space for forever, and it's really your passion. So if you want to make a summary out of that, what are the 3 things that should make everybody excited about logistics?
Yeah, excited. That's an interesting word. I always say people who work in logistics tend to be pretty enthusiastic about it, but you wouldn't necessarily want to get stuck in a lift with them because they can be quite single-minded. But I think that, for me, the great thing about logistics is it's always going to be required. You're always going to need stuff stored and moved. It's always going to be relevant. Also, I think, and again, if I look back over the years I've spent in the space, innovation is pretty much constant. There are new things coming along all the time. So just when you think you've got on top of what's happening in logistics, something comes along and upsets the apple cart. And I think also, if you like, things can always be improved in logistics. And again, I've been fortunate over the years to work with companies in all sorts of industries, all sorts of geographies, both public and private sector. And again, there's still lots of value to be generated within logistics. It's a bit of I always think of it as a bit of because I would say it's the mucky end of logistics. It's, you walk into a room and people can smell diesel as you come in. And people tend to maybe dismiss logistics as, again, not being very exciting. But I think actually if you work in the space, you realize, quite how much things have changed and continue to change. And what's not to like about that when you're going to be spending years and years working in that space?
Yeah. What I personally always find fascinating is that there is like this huge potential for improvement still going on all the time. Because that's, for me at least, right? If I think about it this way, I want to hear your take, but I see a lot of digitalization happening on all different fronts. But at the end of the day, you still can have a forklift driver just run into your package. And then everything's for nothing, essentially.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much manual interaction still that can be improved upon. I feel it's just an endless pit of opportunity, if that makes sense.
Oh, no, yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. And yeah, again, I'm fortunate. I've spent a lot of time working in the software industry. And these days I work for an organization that's not just in logistics and supply chain, but in customer experience and human capital and finance. And as I say, it always gets me to your point that you can have the best website in the world delivering the most fantastic customer experience. You can build a brand and a website that people want to go to and use. But at the end of the day, your package can still get thrown over the fence of a neighbor or left outside in the rain. And you feel like everything that you've invested up to that point of getting the product in your hand is for nothing if you don't get logistics right. I say it's just so integral to so many other business processes. But to your point, it's still an area that sometimes gets neglected and gets forgotten about, which is good for us who work in the industry because it gives us plenty of opportunities still.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yep.
Yeah. Good. So you already said you're working for a very big corporation.
Yep.
But that wasn't always the case. And at one point, you worked for Glog, which was one of the biggest massive takeovers of the industry because it was acquired by Oracle, the company you work for right now. And you've been part of this acquisition period. And given that you are a man of a legendary takeover, I just have to ask, are there any fun anecdotes you can share from the takeover period, maybe?
Yeah, I'm not sure about fun, but probably interesting anecdotes maybe for others out there. One I specifically remember was the takeover happened at the time that as Glog, we were running our user conference, which was in Miami. And it was like hurricane season, I think. I think we had to bring the user conference to a premature close, but not until we'd announced the fact that we were being acquired by Oracle. And I think almost without exception, every customer at the user conference was and saying, why would Oracle buy Glog? We had a great team. We're a well-respected transportation solution. But people were like, Oracle's a technology company providing databases. Why would you get acquired by effectively what is a big tech company? And I'd like to think maybe over the, whatever it is now, almost 20 years since then, that people, our customers in particular, have seen the benefit of that sort of foresight, because even working for Oracle, you scratch your head thinking, how are we going to fit into this type of company? But that's the vision that the people had, was that, again, supply chain was going to be hugely important for customers around the world, and that an integral part of supply chain is logistics and transportation. And I say they had the foresight to then realize they needed to, if you like, build a portfolio of products and build a company that could offer those type of capabilities to end customers. And I think the other thing that really struck me, and I think struck our customers at the time, was that, yes, you're buying a company, but really what you're buying is the people in the intellectual property. And we were fortunate that our founders had worked for transportation software companies for years, had founded this company called Glog based in Connecticut, had built it up, and then, it was acquired. And for a lot of people, that would be like an exit strategy. We've been acquired, we're done, made our money, and off we go and enjoy happy times. But again, what's really surprising for me is that we still have a huge number of those people in the organization. The three founders that were around at the time of the acquisition are still here. They're still running the company, running the, if you like, the development of the product. And it comes back to something you said earlier, Ulf, which is people in logistics tend to be passionate about it. And so I've been fortunate to spend these years 25 years now, with people for whom transportation is their passion. And so I'm not sure if that's a fun anecdote or not, but again, I think it does. If you can find people who are passionate about something, it's a hugely exciting environment to work in, because they're always looking at how you can take things forward, how you can deliver more value. What's the next thing coming over the horizon? And again, when you're coming into work at a 9 to 5, sometimes 5, more often 7 days a week, you want to work with people who are passionate. And that is something I count myself very fortunate to be able to do.
Yeah. So I personally have fun if I learn something.
Right.
And I definitely learned something with the answer. And that already is very fun for me. I think for the audience as well, because they're here for a long time. So you guys, I guess we're fine on a fun answer. Also, having your user conference getting closed by a hurricane, given that we cover a lot of supply chain risk here, is also
yes, yeah. I guess maybe the fun thing is I do remember when I joined. As you can imagine, I came from within the industry, came into Glog, and it was, we're going to build this company. You get shares, you get equity, and if things go well, you'll be able to retire as a millionaire. And here I am, 25 years later, I'm still working. It wasn't quite the Mark Zuckerberg Facebook type of ending. Yeah, but I'm still here and still enjoying it, so that's good.
Yeah, sometimes it's more about having fun than the big bucks. That's okay. Good. So I want to actually, because you already mentioned it, but I want to see if we can deep dive a little bit on this, because if I think about this transformation that went along afterwards, you essentially integrated into a world that didn't know supply chain at all with Oracle, but it seemed to actually work just fine. And Oracle is Oracle Transportation Management is a very good product on the market, a leader in the space. And somehow you achieved something that a lot of other companies struggled with, which is a very good integration. Mm-hmm. So how do you think, were you able to smoothly integrate into this Oracle family of solutions?
Yeah. And again, it's interesting. I guess, again, I'm maybe doing a bit of a disservice when I said Oracle was just a technology company. Clearly, it had a lot of software applications at the time, had the likes of eBusiness Suite, JD Edwards, which had supply chain built into them. It didn't really have anything in the transportation space, though. And so we were required to, back in the time when on-premise applications were pretty much the norm. And how did Oracle's made, I forget the number, it is on the website. We've made a lot of acquisitions over the years. In fact, Glog was acquired about the same time as Oracle acquired Siebel. So again, you can imagine which of those acquisitions got the most press coverage. It certainly wasn't Glog. But again, I think to me, what makes Oracle successful in that sort of acquisition trail, because it's not uncommon in software and technology companies to make acquisitions. But so to me, what made it successful was they were requiring to achieve a vision of where they wanted to be. And again, it's been an interesting journey with Oracle, because I say at the time when we came in, which was end of 2005, beginning of 2006, on-prem was the normal. 2007, as Oracle, we started our move to the cloud, which again drew a lot of attention, a lot of criticism at the time. Criticism, maybe questions about, is cloud really the way to go? And so I think where Oracle has been successful is they had that vision. They knew that cloud was the future. They wanted to acquire companies that, at least to my mind, were recognized leaders in the field, in their particular field, had a technology that would be, if you like, suitable for cloud, because that was the direction that the company was going. And also, back to maybe the point I made earlier, is that they had good people. And I say we ticked all those boxes. What was interesting was, as Glog, we built a solution that was internet ready. Funny enough, we used Oracle as our database. It was written in Java. We used something called WebLogic at the time, at the application server level. After we were acquired, Oracle bought BEA, which meant that we then used an Oracle product again, as well as the database. And then Oracle bought Sun Microsystems, which meant that Oracle had acquired Java, which the application was written in. And so whether that was the strategic thinking or was serendipity, I like to think it was the former, because it meant that we had a technology stack that, if you like, was already Oracle compliant. And that meant we then fitted seamlessly in with the direction the organization was going. And I said before, we still have a lot of people in the organization, and certainly in the ecosystem. A lot of Glog people are still involved in this space. And that comes back to that point about if you've got good people, then you tend to find things are successful. And I say we've been very lucky that in this space and in this ecosystem, we have some very smart, very, very good and very fun people, which I think has been, a big part of the success.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Alone, listening to you explaining things, and how deep you can go with not a lot of words, frankly, shows me that you're one thing, and that is you're able to deeply understand situations, and then also maybe, let's flip the switch a little bit, customer problems, and then work on analyzing how to get to a solution. And that's also one thing you have been recommended for on LinkedIn from one of your peers, who said, working with you is just a wealth of problem solving for customers and really trying to solve their problems, which I would say problem solving for somebody working logistics is pretty normal, hopefully, because otherwise you don't survive. But the way you do it, I think, has a quite unique approach, because you really work with the organization, the people involved. And you already talked about everything around Glog and the acquisition. It's a people's business. So seemingly that seems to be a factor in your problem solving that I believe is quite unique. Do you want to talk about this a little bit and how you then cook the best solutions up for you?
Yeah. It's, again, I'd probably start with a bit of a confession when it comes to the software industry, which is we have a tendency to go into customers and say, we've got a great solution and you should just use it, which, say, if you think of all those great technological revolutions that have come over the years, it's led to that sort of feeling of a bit of hype that, technology can be like the silver bullet to all your problems. The reality, though, is, we have a tendency to sort of treat the symptom rather than the problem. And I think to the point you made, really to understand the problem, you've just got to talk to and listen to the customer. And you've got to try and leave your preconceptions at the door as to how things are going to be fixed. Because even if you see the same problem sometimes across different companies, different industries, sometimes the root causes are different. And I say it's very easy, I think, particularly as a technology company, to come in and say, oh, yeah, this is what you need to do A, B, and C, and everything will be fixed. But say the reality is every customer is different. And how are you going to know, say, what the root cause of the problem is if you don't engage in discussion with them? So, I mean, there's that famous quote, I think, from back at one of the Stoic philosophers is you've got two ears and one mouth, so you should listen twice as much as you speak, which may seem odd coming from me, given I do tend to speak a lot. But actually, I think when you're working with customers and trying to understand what the problem is, it's a really good philosophy to follow. I think a lot of customers, when you speak to them, say, we want visibility and control of what's happening in transport. And it's, oh, okay, you can deploy technology to give you visibility and more control. But you always have to ask, why do you want that? What's it going to deliver for you? If you have perfect visibility and you get more control, what are you going to be able to do that's giving you problems at the moment? And I think really to sit and listen to customers and, if you like, tease out really what the root cause of the problem is, I'd hope it's something that most people try and do.
Yeah. Does it also sometimes feel to you that it's more like a counseling session where you go in and have to understand their inner feelings, that they know they need something, but they never really thought about the why and the how?
Yeah, I think you're pretty much spot on there. And so I count myself incredibly fortunate that over getting on, say now, for a 40-year career, I've been paid to travel sometimes around the world, meet really interesting customers and hear their issues. And I think you're right. I think sometimes it's counseling for the customer. It's also counseling for you as an individual to really be able to sit and listen, and not just listen, but also hear what they're saying, and then think about how can you best address the issues that, if you like, they come up with. And again, to be honest, sometimes I've said it many times, sometimes technology will just get you into trouble quicker. Yeah, it isn't that silver bullet. And sometimes when you listen to customers, sometimes it's not about technology at all. It's about processes or about communication between departments. So technology in and of itself, it isn't necessarily the right solution. And if you don't get those basics done, then the chances of you actually solving the problem diminish because you just put more layers of technology on top of things.
Mm-hmm. But could not just trying, because I think you're right, but sometimes it might be, and I think you had these cases as well, where I buy a solution in order to have a vehicle to address a problem I have for a long time and start the change management, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And again, technology can be a great enabler to change. It really can. And I would say that it had a bit of a difference, certainly made a bit of a difference. But I think by and large, supply chain, we tended to have underinvested in supply chain software as an area. It still amazes me after all these years that if I go into companies and you say, you're running your transportation, and it's a bit of a hackneyed phrase, but a lot of companies still do that on spreadsheet and speed dial. And in this sort of era when companies are trying to juggle cost, customer service, carbon, all of these things, spreadsheet and speed dial is not the answer. It doesn't necessarily mean that every company, much as I might like, should go out there and buy Oracle Transportation Management. But I say that technology can deliver some significant benefits. And as you say, it can be a great enabler for change within the business, not least in, if you like, democratizing some of that logistics data across other business functions.
Yeah. Which then might bring additional value or other value that you don't think about first glance, I would say. Yeah. So a lot of reasons, we touched upon a lot of reasons on why people should invest in more visibility and in more data, also to democratize logistics data. Some of these corporate initiatives that you help solve problems in that kind of are related to that is supply chain risk management, Internet of Things, Industry 4.0.
Yeah.
There are a lot of these big ticket items initiatives. But today I want to know from you, what was one of these things where you felt, oh, that is really tough to get into, and you actually didn't want to because you didn't think it's worthwhile at the start, but then it was like surprisingly interesting for your clients and also surprisingly successful?
Yeah, again, it is an interesting question. I think if I look over the years, again, we've said there have been lots of things that have come on, and I remember back to the days when RFID was going to revolutionize supply chains. We've been through blockchain and everything, so many different initiatives that have promised so much. Again, for me, I think something as simple as carrier connectivity, I think that's had a significant impact. If you look in the market in general, we've seen clearly the emergence of companies who offer this ability just to do the heavy lifting and connect to carriers through multiple different ways, whether it's to the carrier's TMS or whether it's through the telematics or even just through the mobile phone. And so I think when you see things like that, say it's a tough connecting to, I don't know how many carriers there are in Europe these days, probably into the millions. How do you connect to a community that size in a way that makes sense for the carrier, makes sense for the shipper, makes sense for everyone? And so I think we've, again, through the opening up of various sort of means of technology, we've seen that ability to connect. And I say it seems so simple, and yet it can deliver so much benefit. And I think we've then seen expanding, if you like, from things like the carrier community into the areas like risk. And heaven knows that the COVID and the Ever Given brought that into sharp focus. And we've just seen this sort of disruption as the new normal. And I say, if I went back probably just 10 or 15 years, getting that type of visibility of that type of data, getting it proactively and reactively was still something we saw as a bit of a pipe dream. Yeah, you could connect with some carriers through EDI, but probably only the bigger ones. And I say, so you'd have this huge tail of the carrier community you'd never be able to get any information from. And I say it was a significant challenge, but these days people expect it out of the box because they understand that when you have that visibility, it impacts you in so many ways, not just in terms of making logistics more efficient, but giving you better customer service and increasingly leading into areas like sustainability. So we've had our fair share of initiatives in the logistics space that maybe haven't delivered everything that was expected. But I think when you look at areas like that, say particularly around the sort of visibility, say whether that's the carrier, the risk side, it's had a significant impact on the way we do business.
Mhm. Yeah. I always think back about blockchain because I'm also part of the gaming community and gaming space.
Yep.
Where a cryptocurrency was used for scams very early on. So I was never a big fan of blockchain to begin with when the hype came.
Yep.
But yeah, because of my experience of the intransparency that it also can create and the way it can be misused.
Yeah, although again, I think with blockchain, I think like all these things, Gartner had their hype cycle. And I think then you get to this point where actually companies are starting to realize the value of it. And I think, whether it was RFID, whether it's blockchain, whether it's Internet of Things, you get to a point where actually people are then starting to look at it from a value perspective. And then you start to, it's almost, now it's being adopted. I remember, again, if I think back to my warehousing days, when I started in warehousing, people were putting in automated material handling largely to replace expensive resource. People are a big part of the cost base in a warehouse, and they can be very expensive. And so a lot of people put automation in, and I'm talking here late 80s, early 90s. Then most companies rip that stuff out. And now what we're finding, of course, is it's being used to replace, if you like, a workforce that simply isn't there. And so it's funny how you get those sort of cycles happening. And I wouldn't be overly surprised to see things like IoT and blockchain and RFID starting to reappear because the market is different now than it was at the peak of the hype cycle.
Yeah, no, I agree. I worked in telecommunication, was in a lot of telecommunication warehouses, and they also had a lot of automation in the 90s. They then ripped out because telecommunication is very project-based, so you have to do individual picking, and turns out individuality and automation doesn't always go hand in hand. So it was a huge waste of money.
But I'm sure the installations looked impressive.
They definitely did, yeah. There was still some hanging around loosely without being connected to anything. Still looked good. Yeah, didn't make it work, but it looked good.
Looked good.
You're not only a problem solver, you're not only looking at trends loosely, but you're really a thought leader in that space and an innovator. And that's why I just have to ask, let's look at the next 2 to 5 years. What is the hottest emerging technology you are most excited about?
Yeah, it's funny. A question like this, I always think it'd be lovely to be able to say something like matter transference. We're going to be able to beam inventory from one location to another. Sadly, I think that's probably still some ways away. And in terms of the sort of tech, in terms of what's going to make a difference, I think there's probably, from a technology perspective, I think there's like collaboration. I still think there's a lot that can be done through collaborative supply chains. And again, it's interesting when I've again been fortunate to attend things like our sort of customer advisory boards, you always find that the logistics people, by and large, it's, I need to get more utilization. I've maxed things out in terms of our own optimization. So really what I need to do now is I've got some space available on a truck or in a container. I'll find somebody else out there who can fill that space. And so the logistics people are very practical about that. Sadly, it tends to be the sort of the lawyers and the legal side of companies that tend to row back from there, because they get a bit concerned about priorities and sharing data and whatever. But I still think, particularly as we look at the focus on things like reducing CO2 emissions, I think, say collaboration between supply chain important. I also think sort of convergence between supply chain functions. So between when you're going out and doing sales and operations planning, these days, things like transportation can be a constraint on whether that plan is achievable. And yet we tend to look at things like supply chain planning and logistics as little silos of activity. We haven't done a great job necessarily of, if you like, working across those functional silos within a business. And again, it's not sort of, to some extent, hugely exciting. It's not some whiz-bang bit of technology that's going to solve this. But I still think those are the areas where there's a significant amount of value to be realized. And I think if we can pull those functions closer together through the better use of technology, it should really help generate value for customers. And at the end of the day, that's what's going to drive innovation.
Yeah, that is a great answer. And it wasn't AI, so that was also great.
Oh, yeah. If you wanted to talk AI, as you can imagine, go on for that for ages. But
it's fine.
I'll stop myself doing that.
Enough. Yeah, I think we hear a lot about AI. Okay, let's go to the crystal balls of crystal balls. What is a thing you would like to see in logistics, VMS, TMS, whatever, that isn't even on the menu card for anybody else yet?
Yeah. Again, maybe not the answer you might expect. I'd like to see more young people coming into logistics. Good. Again, I said I'm fortunate that I occasionally get invited to speak to students at universities. And I have to say, I'm always a bit embarrassed because I think as supply chain professionals, we've done a pretty bad job at explaining how critical logistics can be in the modern economy, how exciting it can be as a sector to work in. And I say you'll probably sympathize, when you go to sort of logistics conferences, it's not a hugely diverse audience there. People, and I say sometimes I think I've seen a lot of change in the logistics space over the years, certainly from a technology point of view. But we need people to come in and challenge. We need people to come in with new ideas, with backgrounds in different parts of the business. And so that's why what I'd like to see is, to say, not the latest sort of whiz-bang gizmo being used, but I'd like to see more young people looking at supply chain and logistics in particular and thinking, that's somewhere I'd like to work. Because I think otherwise we'll end up with a sort of dearth of innovation and dearth of ideas. And that would be such a shame. So, I'd like to see more younger people coming in and challenging the status quo.
And that's the sole reason why I have a video presence on the internet, by the way.
Right.
So to make it more fun.
Yeah.
So, and in addition to that, as soon as we can open packages with a laser sword, I think it's getting more interesting. Oh.
Yeah, that would be, that would probably attract, quite a cohort of people coming into logistics. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. It would be good. So let's end the podcast on a high note, which every time is the hobby question. Mm-hmm. So just from your background, we all can already see that you're into photography. However, last time I did a podcast, we had somebody having that hobby. But
Oh,
you have a
okay.
second hobby that I want to talk about, which is fishing.
I got my LinkedIn profile.
I might have, and also on the picture on your LinkedIn
Yes.
profile that features a big fish. So what is a similarity you would see in working in the WMS, TMS space and fishing?
Oh yeah, okay, that's a good question. Yeah, I guess I was tempted to say you have to cast a lot of flies on the water before you get a bite. But I think the other thing I think is the similarity. You have to be patient. Fishing is one of those, and I fly fish. I'm fortunate it gets me out into some beautiful parts of the country and the world, some fantastic surroundings. Gives you time to, I can say, think about things, contemplate things. Whether that's in terms of you want to catch a fish, so you have to think about where might the fish be in the river, and the river changes every day. The water levels rise and drop. Sometimes the water's clear, sometimes it's not. Sometimes there's insect life the fish are taking, sometimes they're not. So you have to spend quite a bit of time sort of analyzing before you, if you like, put the fly on the water. And that's a bit like, I think, to me, like logistics problems. We love firefighting in logistics. Whenever you get 2 or 3 logisticians together, they'll talk about the latest calamity and what they did to fix it. The reality is we don't often get time to stand back and look and analyze. And we sometimes have that danger if we fix the symptom, but not the cause. And I like to think that fishing has given me that ability to stand back and analyze. And then once you've done that, then you can immerse yourself in it and hopefully find success. So that's maybe not a bad analogy to end up with.
No, it's good. I love that, actually. It's perfect. Having said that, we're unfortunately already at the end of the podcast. However, it was way longer than anticipated. And a blast. Minute by minute, everything was action-packed, full of insights. Thank you so much, Dominic, for being here and doing this with me.
It's been a huge pleasure. And thank you very much all for inviting me on. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope also the listeners or viewers or however you're enjoying this podcast have enjoyed that episode. And if you have, you actually could like and subscribe. I always forget to shout that out, so I do it right now. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching the whole episode. And with this, we're going to say bye-bye.
Yeah, bye everyone. Thank you.
This was Supply Chain Pioneers. Thanks for watching, listening, or however you are enjoying this podcast. You can find Supply Chain Pioneers on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all other major podcast players, as well as on YouTube at Ulf Talk Supply Chain. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. See you next time.